this is a little different agenda as we normally have. I thought I'd first of all stand up here because I'd like to ask the people making reports to stand up here also. And the reason is that today we're filming this and taping this, I guess the correct term. And I think the camera has a much better angle if those that are reporting to stand up here. However, for introductions, we're not going to do that. I'm going to ask everyone that's here to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start to my right.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Lovezzo from PG&E.
Gino Gasparini with Ecology in San Mateo County.
Jim Bigelow, past president of the chamber.
Mia Rossi with Ecology San Mateo County and Chamber Board Member.
Sherry Morris, San Mateo Credit Union.
Matt Jacobs, Kaiser Permanente.
Fred Marcus and local CPA. Tom Davis, Ontario Real Estate. Mike King, retired.
Paula Anderson-Otta, Frame of Printing and Chamber of Commerce Board Member.
Don Mancini, Pioneer Millwork and Chamber Board.
Sarah Rosendahl, Supervisor Horsley's office.
Ron Collinson, Carlos City Council.
Joe Fazio, Assembly Member, Jim Mullins' office.
Jason Mansfield, PKF Engineers.
Jim Schuyler, civic member of the chamber, retired from PG&E.
Don Horsley.
We were worried he's going to forget who he is.
Not at all. And of course, Mark Holbert, our mayor. There are a couple folks that are not here today. Robert Porter is not here for the school district. He may still show up. I haven't heard one way or the other. Sarah, of course, is here representing John Horsley, but she is going to defer to John in terms of reporting for the county. Joe Fazio is not here. Oh, yes, you are.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. For Kevin Holland's office. Nicole is not here for Jerry Hill's office, and Brian Perkins is not here for Jackie Spears' office. They also not here to send their requests. Excuse me, have some messages up here this morning. I'm just standing up so that you all heard. I did add, I forgot to do one thing and ask anybody if you had any 20 or 30-second commercial that you'd like to make or comment. None at all. One other, yes.
Laura Marley, Legal Shield, sorry for being late. Worry less than more is our motto. We have a portfolio of identity theft and legal service plans for families and small businesses. If you're part of that target, call me.
Thank you. We may still have a few more people show up as well. So with that, then let me introduce our mayor, Mark Holbert, who will give us the status of the city. Actually, the state of the city address is coming up in March 6th, I might add. He's just going to give us an up-to-date this last meeting, Mark.
And you want me to come up there?
Yes, if you would, please. Sure.
Thank you, Fred. Well, in the interest of time, I'll be brief, which is actually also convenient because as I was teasing Jeff Malty, our city manager there, we have some very light agendas going on right now at the council. So if anybody has important topics that they want us to address, make sure you give us a call. We might be able to fit in more with you. Main things right now are we are in the process of preparing our legal appeals, or initially regulatory appeals related to the Line 147 situation. As you know, PG&E was granted the right to repressurize Line 147, which runs up along Britain Avenue back in late December, which we believe is contrary to what the regulations of the pipeline actually require. So we're going to be making our case first to the PUC to ask them to reverse themselves, and then if that's unsuccessful, we will move on to court from there. And the other thing that I was going to mention is we are also moving forward with what we call the landmark hotel property acquisition. Council voted last November to acquire 3 properties that came on the market near the Holly 101 interchange, which provide the potential to fulfill a very long-standing San Carlos dream of having a major high-class hotel at the entryway to the city. As expected, whenever you're buying commercial property, we have run into a few environmental issues as we have been doing the ground surveys and land surveys. Nothing that we think is going to put the thing permanently on hiatus, but we're working through the details of that, figuring out how we're going to respond to it, and how we're going to work things out with the property. So with that, I will pass the baton off to whoever is next.
Joe, I think you're up.
Yeah.
All right. Since last time we met, the governor's budget was released the day before expected. They kind of caught us off guard, so we've got kind of a detailed thoughts on the budget and go over it with you here today. So the governor's plan includes $151 billion in spending on the general fund, which is a $11 billion increase over the 2013-14 levels. Recent sharp increases in personal tax collecting, driven largely by soaring stock prices in 2013, have improved the state's budget condition significantly. The governor proposes a $2.3 billion reserve and school financing. The budget uses much of the larger projected growth in Prop 98 budget to pay down $6.2 billion in school deferrals. In addition, the governor has proposed a rainy day fund ballot measure that should show up in November. And one thing the governor doesn't mention much in his budget is transitional kindergarten for all. It's something that the Senate and the Assembly want to champion this year. We're lucky to have Cherry Hill as one of the co-sponsors of that bill, which will give San Mateo County a good voice at the table. Kevin had, through our Education Advisory Committee, has taken a lot of comments on how this bill will affect kindergarten in the area, and with correct facilities and credentialing for teachers. There's a lot of details that need to be worked out, and we're lucky to have Kevin and Sherry there at the table to work on these details. But here we have a quote from Kevin. The governor's budget includes much needed investment in critical services like education and healthcare, while at the same time demonstrating fiscal responsibility and establishing a rainy day fund and pay down past debts. The model of debt repayment, coupled with commitments to save new revenue in anticipation of future deficits outlined in the budget, is promising. It makes a departure from historical patterns of high spending commitments during good budget years and inadvertently leading to large deficits when the state fiscal fortune turns around. Still, more needs to be done towards addressing our long-term fiscal obligation, such as unfunded liability in the state teachers' retirement system. Yet, on balance, I am pleased with the governor's proposal, and with echoing many of the fiscal responsible themes in the Assembly Democratic Caucus blueprint for a responsible budget released in December. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Joe?
Yeah.
Quick question, Joe.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. I thought you mentioned there's a surplus of $2.3 billion.
Yes.
Then what's a rainy day fund? What is?
So the rainy day fund they're taking that surplus and they're dividing it in different ways, but they want to create a rainy day fund so that when the budget times do turn down, like it will eventually or it's a cyclical economy, that it kind of it softens some of the curves so that when we're going up really high, we're saving some, but that as the economy turns down, that it can soften some of that, soften some of the cuts.
Is it just kind of like locking in a surplus, in other words?
It is. It's locking in some of the surplus. I'm not particularly sure what the details of the bond measure and what the number exactly is that will be locked in, and then at that point, what is saved. But the idea is to soften some of the cuts when it does happen. Yeah.
Do you know if it's based on a percentage or?
I think it's actually based on a number, but I'm not particularly sure. I can definitely get back to you on it.
Anyone else with comments or questions? So thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Well, as I said, we had a lot of representatives of the various other governmental agencies unable to attend today, which I think is good because it gives us more time to have Don brief us on the county. A little bit about Don Horsley. I've known Don a long time, and from his association with the Sheriff's Air Squadron, which he was very much supportive of. And for those of you who don't know it, the Air Squadron has a new airplane, and its law enforcement capabilities has greatly increased as a result of that. But anyway, going back a little further in Don's background, he's a graduate of San Francisco State University, where he graduated with honors. He originally didn't know he wanted to be a cop, and then wanted to be a teacher. So he started out teaching in the probation department, and then went on to teach middle school, and ultimately decided to embark on a law enforcement career, which I might add, I think was a very distinguished one. So he shifted to the sheriff's office, where he started as a patrol deputy and worked his way up there. In 1993, he was elected sheriff of San Mateo County. There he's very instrumental in the planning and finally approval of the new county correctional facility. Organized a multi-jurisdictional law enforcement approach to East Palo Alto, which significantly reduced the murder rate there. After voluntarily leaving the sheriff's office, he was elected to the Sequoia Healthcare District, where he was the fourth president. And there he increased funding for several organizations in the community, and in fact increased the total grants for health-related programs over $8 million. Don's a resident of Emerald Hills in Redwood City, where he lives with his wife and one of his children, Matt. He has 2 other adult children, and I should add that as district supervisor, which is a change. Before Don was elected, as you know, all supervisors were essentially at large for the county, and now with district guys, Sarah has reported that in the past. And since his district now also includes a large portion of the unincorporated area, we're focusing not only on our suburban areas or such, but also on agriculture, which is a significant part of his district now, and also his ongoing interest and involvement in healthcare and improving that in our area. Again, my pleasure to introduce Don Horsley. I hope I did this right, Don.
So,
There's no mic.
no, but you took my remarks here. Well, first of all, thanks for the introduction, Fred. And one of the things Fred pointed out was I was a middle school teacher, and I found that it was safer to go into law enforcement, so I left being a middle school teacher. Well, good morning. It is great to be here this morning in the great city of San Carlos, one of my cities that I represent in the 3rd District. And, give you a state of this, the county really is in great shape. We've got a vibrant and really diverse economy, and we also have a very compassionate support system for people who are less fortunate than many of us. And San Mateo County really is one of the gems of the state of California. We also, on the other hand, have a history of being overshadowed by San Francisco and Silicon Valley, even though this is the place where people really want to live and where they want to play and raise their families. And so everybody knows in this room that all those things in San Carlos, that's why it has this motto of the city of good living. And in fact, the man who coined that phrase, Frederick Drake, I don't know if anybody knows who Frederick Drake was. He was the founder of the San Carlos Chamber of Commerce, and he was also a newspaper man, and he promoted the city through his San Carlos Enquirer following its incorporation in 1925. Well, in spite of all that we know about the wonderful quality of life that we share here in San Mateo County, we continue to be really vexed, and actually I'm a little bit frustrated a lot of times by the fact that people really call us the best kept secret in the entire state of California and the Bay Area. Everyone in the world knows the name of San Francisco, but when you start calling out the names of our 20 cities in the county, generally nobody knows what they are. But it's a little different story, you know, for San Francisco, obviously, and for San Jose. And while people leave their hearts in San Francisco, and we are asked if they know the way to San Jose, there's no musical reminder of San Mateo County. So maybe somebody here, if you're musically inclined, can come up with a song, a little ditty for San Mateo County. But I think that's really a shame, because in San Mateo County really is a truly remarkable place in so many ways. We have amazing scenery from the Bay to the Pacific Ocean, remarkable businesses from Genentech to Oracle to Facebook, as well as many smaller businesses that make up this community that is so special to all of us. I think our quality of life here is really second to none. The challenge is finding ways to share that quality of life throughout the ranks of all of our residents. So we do have a dynamic philosophy of helping people through our county government. So I do want to talk about really how proud I am to be a member of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, and how grateful I am to the compassionate and caring voters who live here. It's really because of them that we're really able to face our fiscal crisis and challenges in a much more reasonable manner, and bringing high standards to local health care, public safety, and even education. As Joe mentioned about preschool for all and all-day kindergarten, that's one of the initiatives that the county has actually put aside $10 million. Hopefully, if the state comes up with a similar program, we'll be able to actually achieve that for all of our schools. We would really kind of probably focus on those schools that have the most difficulty. You know, one of the things that we know is that a good measure of how kids are going to be successful is third grade reading. You know, it's said that you learn to read up to third grade, and after third grade you read to learn. And if you don't know how to read or aren't at grade level of third grade, your chances of falling behind and becoming a dropout and much less of a successful in later life really significantly increase. Well, and also it doesn't help that or doesn't hurt that our economic engines in the real estate, and as we all know, real estate's just going sky high in this county, and the tech world really are booming in both not only San Francisco, Silicon Valley, but also San Mateo County. So that reality really helps us in government to be much more effective. Not to mention the fact that we actually only have an unemployment rate of 4.8%, which I think is probably the lowest in the state. It was above 12% during the recession just 5 years ago. So you can how dynamic and vibrant our economy really has become. Now, San Mateo County Supervisor's responsibility in county government range from membership in regional and state agencies to maintaining a really comprehensive health system and working with other elected officials, from the sheriff, who now provides your law enforcement, to the elections officers and our assessor, etc. The ability to collaborate effectively is perhaps the most important skill I think that the 5 elected supervisors really share. It's something that local government really seems to do best. In fact, I would have to say much better than larger, more better known bodies. I won't name them necessarily, but I think we all know some of the difficulties that we have in Congress. Seems that local government really does. This is really where the action's at. And we really are I think the branch of government that really is probably the most effective, not only the county, but also the cities. Last year, I did have the privilege of serving as president of the Board of Supervisors, and it was really an honor and a challenge for me. And I have to tell you, well, I really enjoyed the ceremonial part. The most rewarding part really involves the actual projects that I'm working on and the problems that I and my colleagues are trying to solve. By the way, as talking to the mayor, the real power of being the president of the Board of Supervisors is that I got to lead everybody in the Pledge of Allegiance, and that was about it. You're just one of 5, and you can't really tell them what to do. And if you try, they'll let you know. So, as you know, the 3rd District of San Mateo County has a larger percentage of unincorporated area than any of the other 4 districts. The three largest cities of the district, as you know, are San Carlos, Pacifica, Half Moon Bay, but I also have Woodside, Atherton, Portola Valley, parts of Menlo Park, and a little bit of Belmont as well. So we five on the Board of Supervisors don't really have authority over the city governments in our county, even though people seem to think that we can overrule them. That's just not the case. But maybe the Maltby dynasty will change all of that. As you know, you have Jeff Maltby and I've got John Maltby. Both of them are extremely competent and extremely effective executives, so I'm really happy that John was able to come back, and we really enjoy working with Jeff on the occasions that we do get to work together. But we also have responsibilities to provide health care for low-income residents, and that includes both physical and mental health. We actually provide health care for a significant number of people in our county. Actually, the interesting thing about it, we're the highest, average income for San Mateo County is the highest in the state. I don't know if you know that. Maybe because of Facebook, and when it was just dramatically surpasses other areas of the state. At the same time, our number of people who are on Medi-Cal, which is for, you have to be low income, you have to be at the federal poverty level, has gone from 69,000 5 years ago, and here we have a booming economy, to 102 today. So it shows that a lot of people are really being left behind. So besides health care, both physical and mental, we also fund the criminal justice system, and the county has diverse responsibilities ranging from regulating restaurants, taking care of environmental issues. But, city elected officials really control most of what goes on in cities. What we do, we're actually considered to be I guess the word would be the sort of the hidden branch of government. People oftentimes don't know what we do because of the fact that what we really are is the arm of state government. On the other hand, in the unincorporated areas, which when I was the sheriff, I used to call them the lands of the sheriff, they do look to the county government to provide those services that a city would normally offer. And I've actually been known to joke about the fact that I'm the mayor of large portions of San Mateo County. And while I'm no longer the president of the Board of Supervisors, I still like that title of mayor of the unincorporated parts of San Mateo County. It's really something that I enjoy fooling around with when I go out and talk to people in the unincorporated areas, and it's something I actually take very seriously. We work really hard to provide the kind of services that the unincorporated areas don't get from the cities because they don't have a city government. So looking back on 2013, I'd like to highlight just a few of the items that we worked on. We finalized plans to open the Devil's Slide Trail in 2014 as a new San Mateo County park. It'll really be a world-class specialty trail for viewing and enjoying the gorgeous coast. And when you get an opportunity to go out there, it really is rather remarkable. If you were driving by Devil's Slide in the past, you might be able to look over the side, but you really never got a chance to look at the geology of the rock formations, nor were you able to see the soaring birds, because you don't realize how high up it is. And there are peregrine falcons that have made a remarkable comeback, and a common murre, that's another bird. I'm not necessarily a bird watcher, but I've gone out with the Audubon Society, and they've kind of educated me about all the different kinds of birds, and it really is fascinating when you're walking on the road. By the way, we also have to have people walking on that road to get the birds used to seeing people. Now you would say, well, you used to have cars before. Well, it's true, but cars are different than people, and cars would just be zooming on past, and so apparently the birds over the years got used to that, but they're not used to people. Now, again, that's the Audubon Society telling me that. So we have cores of people walking out there, looking over the side so that the birds get used to us. And the reason for that is we want them to continue nesting. So they get kind of, shy when people are looking at them. So, well, in any case, that park is going to open in March 21st. And then I think our problem is going to be popularity. We estimate that it's going to be about 80,000 people a year visiting that area. And there are actually going to be trails that link both the south and the north portal. And we've had some difficulty with, there's some land that we do not own that is owned by a single individual, and the price went from $300,000 to $1 million. We're trying to negotiate a more reasonable price to link up, to make sure there's a trail that goes all the way from Pacifica to the mid-coast and Half Moon Bay and beyond. We think it's going to be a remarkable trail, and it's a remarkable little stretch of San Mateo County. There will be some parking up there, but it's only about 50-some spaces. So if you think 80,000 people, we're going to have some problems figuring out how to get them to, from, and so it doesn't jam up the traffic. By the way, that tunnel there is really a remarkable tunnel. It really has changed the dynamics of traveling on the south coast there. And I think it's also going to affect property values, because you now have a reliable source of transportation. Before, when you had Devil's Slide, the rocks would fall down, it would shut the whole road down, so the traffic would back up. You'd have to turn around and go always back on 92. The traffic would become a nightmare. Well, now that this is reliable, straight through the mountain, it makes a significant difference. You know that you're going to get to San Francisco, and you can actually get to San Francisco really fast from the coast side. So we estimate that it's going to have an impact on not only traffic but also property values on the coast. But there will not be a big building frenzy on the coast, because we have a local coastal plan that limits building, and there's also an overlay of the Coastal Commission, so it won't really change the character of the coast. We've actually been able to save, I think, a remarkable piece of California coast side. In any case, we also opened Fair Oaks Health Center. That's in North Fair Oaks. It provides health care for low-income people. We actually run about 7 clinics throughout our county besides the county hospital. We also are developing plans for Pescadero Health Clinic. In Pescadero, we have about 1,000 farm workers. People don't realize it's a big agricultural community. And they need to have, they can't get to doctors in San Mateo or Daly City or Redwood City, so we're going to have a mobile van that will actually bring doctors out to those communities. Actually, the doctors, we believe, will come from Stanford. We're going to pay for it, but I think it's a big step in improving the health care for our farm workers who provide good, nutritious, fresh food for all of us. We're also facing a looming crisis of the reality of Seton Medical Center and Seton Coastside being sold by the Daughters of Charity. Daughters of Charity actually believe in their mission, and they take more Medi-Cal, and that's really low-income people, than any hospital in San Mateo County, and they are actually going broke as a consequence. And so we're trying to figure out what we can do to help them. So we don't really know, and I really can't tell you what's going to happen, but we're really going to be working overtime with both them and our health plan to see what we can do to maintain health services for those residents in Daly City and also the residents on the coast side. Much of it's going to really depend on who ends up buying that hospital and what emerging facilities will come out of the sale. And after that tragic shooting in Sandy Hook, we added sheriff's deputies to the Sheriff's School Resource Officer program. That all your schools in San Carlos now have school resource officers assigned. And we also are working with county schools and the County Office of Education, and we've developed a crisis intervention team and protocols to make all of our schools and our kids safer. And as for the National Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, California's really done a great job with Covered California. The website actually works, and with the expansion of Medicaid, or Medi-Cal in our case, we believe that more of our low-income people are going to be served. They'll be served through the health plan of San Mateo and probably also private providers as well. Actually, we anticipate about 50,000 people who did not have insurance will end up with insurance because of that program. We're also pursuing safety projects on transportation corridors ranging from new bike lane striping in Alpine Road to comprehensive plans for Highway 1 over on the coast side. This year we're going to be entering into a second half of our 2-year budgeting process, and that'll help us to maintain ongoing programs. And we also really are doing much more in terms of evaluating the success of the programs that we actually have. So we're doing a lot of performance evaluation efforts. We are seriously making inroads on paying down our retirement liability. We are making sure that the county remains fiscally sound and a fiscally reliable employer and a reliable and sound steward of taxpayer dollars. We actually are putting 50 million extra into our retirement system this year. We're keeping our contribution rate at a higher rate, and we'll be contributing an additional 10 million a year for the next 9 years so that we can get our, by the way, our unfunded liability has a lifetime of 15 years, which you hear about the state of California has 30 years. So we've reduced it to 15 years. We think by the end of the 15 years, our funds will be 93% fully funded. So in my district, I've really committed, as Fred said, to supporting and working with the agriculture industry, and I'm really proud of also we have some long-range plans to revitalize Princeton by the Sea. I don't know if you know where that's at. It's by the harbor, and when we start talking about fixing, I hate to use the word fixing, but doing this a plan for Princeton, we had people saying, oh, wait, we like it the way it is. And I realized they actually saw the fishing pier and the boats. They didn't see Princeton. Princeton is a dump. Princeton is where you have convex boxes where stacked one on top of the other, where people are living in. There's no sanitation. And so we had cars all over the place. So we started a process of cleaning up Princeton, and now we're embarking on a plan to see what is it that we could do to make that a much more viable. It's the only industrial area that we have on the entire coast, so we are working very hard on that plan. We also are involved in solving constituent issues like, well, both related to Half Moon Bay's airport as well as San Carlos's airport. You know, San Carlos has this new thing called Surf Air. Now, you know, you have the big buses for Google. Surf Air is similar in a sense that for high-income people, well, maybe not high-income people, but if you can buy a subscription to Surf Air, and then you get a certain number of trips every month back and forth to wherever they go, and I think mostly they go to Southern California. So instead of going to SF International, going through all that security stuff, you can go on a Surf Air. But the problem is that the 10 flights a day that they have cause a lot of noise, and they have a bigger plane. So we've been working with them to change the angle of descent from 4 degrees, 3 degrees to 4. Actually, it's, yeah, from 3 to 4, which means they would fly at a higher level and come down, and they'd be flying at a higher level, and also varying the route so they're not over the same houses every day. We think we're going to be able to solve that with both the angle of descent and by changing the flight patterns. And in Half Moon Bay, we don't have necessarily the noise complaint, but we have an airport overlay that has impact on potential other developments. So while we enjoy the boom in property values here in San Mateo County, result of all that value means that it's becoming more and more difficult for people to find affordable housing. So the county's exploring ways to assist people through our HOPE program, which is housing our people effectively. That's really geared towards dealing with the homelessness. I'll give you an example. You might think there are not many homeless people in San Carlos. Well, there are. You know the old building that used to be AAA? There's a homeless guy who lives in that creek there. And you know when you come you're on El Camino and there's a big pole and it has all the signs for Rotary and all the service clubs? That's somebody's home. Her name is Annie. So we are trying to get those people into supportive housing, deal with the mental health issues, because most of them really have mental health issues. The other program we have is called HEART, and it's a housing and regional trust, and that program is geared to building affordable housing. One of the things that we recently did is that with the dissolution of RDAs, the county had a windfall of about $13 million. So what we did is we put $3 million aside to build some additional acts or housing or additional room for people who are homeless, and also for transitional housing. And the $10 million we put out to bid to cities. Any city that had a project for affordable housing that could be built within 2 to 5 years would be eligible for a grant. And so we put all those grants out for about $2.5 million to cities from, I don't think San Carlos was one, but from Daly City to East Palo Alto. One of the advantages of that booming real estate market is we purchased a few years back Circle Star, the 2 buildings in Circle Star, and we bought it for $40 million. And our idea initially was we're going to move county government out of rental property into those 2 buildings. Well, when they started looking at, remodeling, they were, our public works came back and said, well, it'll cost us $9 million to remodel. And I said, you must be kidding. These are Class A buildings that we bought. Why would we spend $9 million to remodel? He said, oh, well, we have to do. No, you don't. Just change the carpet. And then they wanted to put our public safety dispatch in, and the engineer came back and said, oh, you could put the public safety dispatch in this building, but you have to rebuild it to make it seismically meet the essential standards seismically. So I started agitating, as the other board members, rent this thing out and sell it, get rid of it. We're not rebuilding. We're going to look stupid if we rebuild a brand new building to put our public safety dispatch in it. So, with the help of John Maltby, we leased it out to a company called SoftBank. It's a Japanese company, and they initially took one building, and then because of the booming economy, there was a company in Redwood City called Turn, and they wanted the other building. So we went to SoftBank and said, hey, if you don't want this other building, they had an option to take it. If you don't want this company, Turn wants that building. So SoftBank took the whole building. They then spent $20 million remodeling it, and the top floor is remodeled to look exactly like his office in Japan. So in any case, the $40 million that we purchased, we now have in a market for $83 million. So it'll do two things. It's good for us. I have to say, we didn't anticipate that. We kind of fell into it. I actually thought that we could probably say, oh, what a bunch of genius. We anticipated. We did not anticipate it, but it's going to double the price that we purchased it at. It'll also help San Carlos because your tax rate is based on the actual sale of that house or that building. So if it's $83 million, if 1% of that goes to property tax, so both the school district, the healthcare district, the city, the county will benefit long-term from increase in taxes. So we look pretty smart, even though we didn't start out that way. So, there are actually those big changes in county government, as Fred alluded to, the voter-approved decision to have district-based elections instead of at-large elections. The goal, and I completely support that goal, is to have higher voter turnout in local communities, resulting in stronger, perhaps more diverse representation. And what, of course, that means to me is that every single voter in the 3rd district now is 5 times more important as they were in the last election in terms of their voting weight. But at the same time, I think every one of our supervisors, we really consider our responsibility countywide. Now, we certainly consider a priority for our district, but we still have to look at countywide, especially all the various countywide agencies that we sit in, like Transportation Authority, Samtrans, the Joint Powers Board. We have to, in fact, city councils have to look the same way, is that when you're on those regional boards, you really have to think regionally. You can't think just in your own small little district. But it does make there's an advantage to district elections in the sense that I no longer have to, when I campaign, I no longer have to go from one end of the county to the other. I can really just focus on my district and get to know more of local people in my district. And so I think in the long run, I think it's actually going to be a good thing. And but in any case, that kind of concludes my remarks, and I would be glad to take questions. Tom.
A question regarding the levies. At one time, there's a lot of talk about raising the level of the levies to keep out tidal flow.
Yeah.
What's the status of all that?
Well, if you think about global warming and sea level rise, actually one of our supervisors, Dave Pine, had a recent conference on it. It looks like we probably have to plan for a 3-foot sea level rise. It turns out San Mateo County, probably of all the state of California in terms of sea level rise, probably we're going to end up with about 40% of the properties that are at risk. And all of our bayfront property is really significantly at risk. So we are going to we're going to have to be looking for state and federal resources to raise all those levees over a period of time. The good thing is that we're not talking about 5 feet, 10 feet. We're talking about 3 feet, and I think that's I think that's doable, but yeah, we're going to end up having to put money into raising levies, and we're going to have, because all those we're not going to abandon all those properties on the bayfront. On my side, on the ocean side, we probably will we start looking at zoning. We have to look at what's going to be the impact on bluffs, what's going to be the impact on beaches, what's going to be, there's a whole variety of things that we're going to require in future development. So you don't want to be putting people in harm's way, because then a disaster occurs. It's really we have some responsibility making sure that people are going to be safe in the future. Gino.
Hey, John, I think during your campaign, or having your campaign, I think you still have to go from one end of the cabin to the other, don't you? I mean, from Daly City to Pascadero, so you have the largest area.
I do. I go all the way from Pacifica down to the Pacifica
So
to the Santa Cruz border. So actually, in terms of areas, I cover a lot.
You cover a lot.
I do, yeah. And I actually I like going down to the coast.
But I do have a question. The county jail. I know it's not your district anymore, but any updates on the jail?
It's big.
It's happening.
Realignment. I'm sure you all have some idea that the state prison system was burgeoning, and federal courts said to the state of California, you can't hold this many people. You're not doing it in a humane way, and that's unconstitutional. And you have to get rid of those. You have to do something with them. You have to either free them, build more facilities very quickly, but you can't continue to hold people under inhumane conditions. So they sent off about 30,000 prisoners to locals. Our jail is being, first of all, our jail was overcrowded. It was over capacity. And our women's jail really needed to be replaced. It really didn't have the kind of facilities that you really need to be, to deal with the population that we have. And so we are embarking on building this new jail. It's actually coming out of the ground pretty slow. First of all, we built it on we wanted to build it actually in the downtown area, but Redwood City certainly didn't want that because of all the development. So they found, and we agreed, they found another site that's an industrial site. By the way, the name of the street was called Chemical Way. It's not called Chemical Way for nothing. So we had to do lots of cleanup on the project. And we got it to the point where we dealt with all of the contaminants. So you actually could put housing on that property now. But nevertheless, it took that delayed thing. So I think it's delayed by about 11 months because of all of those issues. But it's coming along. I suspect it'll be done. Now, the sheriff says in the middle of 2015. I think it's overly optimistic. I think it's actually going to be the end of 2015, potentially even 2016. But it'll have capacity. Actually, it has capacity for about 560 prisoners. In the meantime, we're doing okay. One of the things that the legislation allowed when the governors and the legislature sent those 30,000 prisoners down to locals is they had what were called three nons: non-sex offender, non-violent, and non-whatever. But they also gave the courts more authority to do split sentencing, and our courts have been great. Half of all the people they're sentencing, they do split sentencing. So instead of giving somebody 4 years, they give them 2, and then 2 years on probation. And that's really helped us get through. Our population really has not increased that much. But we'll be able to handle a larger population. What I'm afraid of is that, it's the old thing is when you build it, they will come. What we are concerned about is that once we have those 560 beds, that we may end up making less use of those alternatives. And I hope that the experience that we're having so far is that the alternatives are working. So when people think about all these people coming back and worries about increasing crime is not going up, it's down. So it's actually working. It's working at the state level, it's working at the county level, it's working at the local level, that it's not increasing crime. The other thing about crime in San Mateo County is the demographics don't tell me that we're going to end up with more crime. I'll give you an example. In 2030, 25% of the population will be over 65. Can you imagine 65-year-old people committing crimes? I don't think so. So the demographics, well, you never know. So the demographics don't tell us that our population is not going to go up. But we do, the number of people, the women that we have in jail is somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from 120 to 140, and the facility was built for 80. So there's really no room for programming, and that's really a shame. So that'll help us. It'll reduce the new jail will allow us to have a women's facility that's much more appropriate. Women in our jail are typically the primary caregiver of their children. They all want their kids back. So we wanted to have a facility where there would be a lot more interaction between the moms and kids. Now, the reason for that is that if those kids don't develop an empathetic relationship with somebody between 0 to 5, they will never develop an empathetic relationship to anyone. And what will happen with that is that they'll end up as criminals. So what we want is to make sure that those kids have a better shot at life than they might have otherwise.
And now what's going to happen to the existing McGuire facility?
The one that's across, no, that'll stay. That stays, that's all the pre-trial because it's connected to the courts, and we don't want to be marching people on the street.
Right.
So that'll stay. The women's jail will go, and actually we're going to expand, the women's jail will become, not the jail, but the part that's next to it is run by Shelter Network. We're actually going to expand that. So some of that money we talked about, the $13 million that the county had, we're going to put some of that money into expanding that to double the capacity to take care of the homeless. And we're really focusing on veterans, for example. Mike.
If you need some support on the sale of Surface Star, some of that money is going to go to Redwood City because that parcel is also.
We're not telling them.
When it was originally built, Redwood City has a piece of it.
It's the parking lot.
Yeah, I know.
So okay.
But the question I have, back to Seton. What's going to happen with the money that was allocated under, I don't know, was it Measure A or B that was carved out for the hospital? Now that the Daughters of Charity are going to sell Seton.
Well, it depends on who buys it, and if.
So it would flow to the buyer, or?
Well, no. There's no long-term agreement. Our agreement with them was month to month. Well, our agreement was it was actually a 9-month agreement. We were funding it for 9 months, doing a strategic plan with them at the same time. That kind of changes things. Now, we still are committed to making sure that there are health care for the Medi-Cal patients up in Daly City. So we'll continue with that. But all bets are off in terms of whoever buys that. I don't, if it's a for-profit hospital that buys it, we're certainly not going to have the same kind of arrangement. But if it were, for example, if it were a Catholic healthcare organization, or if it was a nonprofit that made a commitment to provide the same kinds of services at Seton, then we probably would. So we'll have an opportunity to actually have some influence on what happens to that in the future. The other thing is that site is 33 acres, by the way. And so there are other things that could be done with some parts of that site.
Well, either build a new site or do a seismic retrofit to the building, which is.
Well, the master plan showed that the size of the hospital would have to be significantly downsized. That, inpatient hospitalization is far less than it was some years back. As you know, there's a lot of outpatient surgeries that occur now. You go in the morning and you're back home at nighttime. People don't stay in hospitals as they used to in the past. Hospitals like to get you out as fast as possible. So that would have to downsize. But what happens with that, I don't know. It just could be that we could end up with clinics up there, or there's no guarantee that money goes to Seton.
And I assume it's the follow-on is for the site that they have out in, I want to say
Coast site?
Yeah, the Apple Bay site.
In the coast site, well, that's called Seton Coast Site. That has about 116 long-term care beds. I don't know if you know, these long-term care organizations are going bankrupt in the county. It just is very expensive. When we were running Burlingame Health Center, it cost us for one patient 1 year $150,000 a year. So we got out of the business. We turned it over to a private provider called Brius, and with Brius, we still have a relationship with Brias, and we're going to see if we could talk to Brias about potentially operating a co-site, Seton co-site for just the skilled nursing. There's also an emergency room, but I don't think, they don't really need an emergency room that, it can't really handle emergencies. In fact, I think if you have a really serious emergency, you better not go there. You better go directly over to another hospital. Either get life flighted out or ambulance over. They just don't have the capacity. They could give, stitches or something. So I think what we'll do is we'll probably have to put some money into an urgent care facility on the coast side, but an emergency room doesn't work. Ron?
Well, speaking of healthcare and urgent care, that was going to be my question. I'm just wondering what the county could do, since the county is in the health business for people on Medicaid, to encourage the construction or placement of more urgent care centers all over the county. That the most expensive entry point into the healthcare system is the emergency room. And that's where poor people go. That's where actually I should say, that's where a lot of uninsured people go because they don't have any insurance. And I was talking with my doctor's spouse, who happens to be a Redwood City councilwoman now, and she says that there are very few urgent care centers in San Mateo County. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that the county can do, or is it something that has to go to the state level to encourage the placement, erection of more urgent care facilities?
That's a good question, but I would say that if the private sector doesn't see this as something that they want to get into, I'm not sure why we would, except that in areas like that are remote, like Pescadero or on the coast side, where it is difficult to get on the other side, that probably makes sense for us to do it in those areas. But otherwise, we have a string of clinics from one end of the county to the other. We have about 7 different clinics that go from Daly City all the way down south. And East Palo Alto has Ravenswood Health Care. So in a way, they actually have access to an urgent care. But it's, for the private, and those are for us, for our clients, our Medi-Cal clients, or the people who are completely indigent. So we have 2 programs, not only Medi-Cal, but we also have a thing called ACE. And ACE is Access and Care for All, and that has about 30,000 people on it. So our clinics take care of all those people, but it's true that people do end up, that maybe the people that we don't know that aren't in either our ACE program or aren't in our Medi-Cal program, it may well end up at emergency rooms. But it's just something that doesn't, it doesn't lend itself to a profitable model for either I hate to say these, that they are not, the nonprofit hospitals, they're sort of into making money. They're not into losing money. So they haven't seen that as a big need. There are things that are called docs in a box. There are private things, but I'm not sure I would go to one of those. Maybe.
Well, we're talking about medical needs and hospitals. What about the county hospitals? My understanding is that there's some significant parts of it are really underutilized, and it's also still a major financial drain on the county.
Well, it is. We have to subsidize it to the tune of about anywhere from 50 to 75 million a year, and there are parts of it that are underutilized. And so our med surgical units have about 30. The average census is about 30, and Seton has roughly, of Medi-Cal patients, roughly 30. But we have capacity for over 60. So if Seton closed, we could actually take that capacity. So we're under capacity at the county hospital. We've got space. So if Seton closed, their med surgical units could come to the county. It just is it's a little less convenient if you live in Daly City to come to San Mateo. But it's not still. It's actually a pretty good hospital. It's actually seismically safe, and it's actually a very nice hospital. And our doctors, by the way, aren't county employees. They are all contract employees. So actually, the care that they get is excellent.
Other questions or comments? John, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
A couple of closing comments for Dave Richard, make without notice committee. One is that I already mentioned that there's the State of the City address on the 6th of March featuring our own Mark Aldrich. But in addition to that, on the 7th, we have Jackie Spear here. And we're working on a different plan for that. Hopefully we'll set up some sort of maybe a continental breakfast or such that we really are working with Brian and with Jackie Spear's office is how we're going to do that. Maybe a little bit of a nominal charge for any expenses. I think that's good to do because we've had a tradition of doing that kind of thing for major legislators in the past, and it's been quite a while since we've done
So
something.
you didn't do that for me.
A little respect. So keep that in mind. So it's the 6th for Mark and the 7th, hopefully, for Jackie Spears. One other point, kind of feedback to the group, and that is that it came up at the last meeting. Actually, Jeff Balti asked if having this meeting more as an opportunity to give feedback from the citizenry to the government as opposed to having government reports. I've given that a lot of thought, and there are some real drawbacks for that. First of all, you all are welcome to make comments and ask questions of the government representatives that are here every month. But if we open it up to large amounts of citizenry input that goes like that, I'm concerned. And in my years of doing this, it has happened a few times. We get into a political debate, which is something which we do not want to do as council. Yes, Ron?
If I could make one announcement, I think if Robert Porter were here, he might have announced it. The San Carlos Educational Foundation Spring Fling is March 1st, Saturday, March 1st, and it's open to everybody, and it's a big fundraiser for our school district.
Thank you. We're on time. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you next time.